Once pristine, once untouched, once pure, all of that's no longer there anymore. Stripped down, torn apart, chipped away piece of our hearts, yet still we breathe. Like the wind we still move, like the waves we rise high, like the sun we never die. We will stay standing, hear our calling. We are rooted to the ground, we're here to stay. No staying quiet, we stand united. We are rooted to the ground, can't tear us down. We're here to stay. Oh, 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 oh. We're here to stay. Oh, there is hope, there is strength, there is power, there is change in you and I, in you and I. There is hope, there is strength, there is power, there is change in you and I, you and I. Like the wind we still move, like the waves we rise high, like the sun we never die. Like the wind we still move, like the waves we rise high, like the sun we never die. We are standing, hear our calling. We are rooted to the ground, we're here to stay. No staying quiet, we stand united. We are rooted to the ground, can't tear us down. We're here to stay. Oh, 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 oh. We're here to stay. Oh, 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 there is hope, there is strength, there is power, there is change in you and I, in you and I. There is hope, there is strength, there is power, there is change in you and I, you and I. Like the wind we still move, like the waves we rise high, like the sun we never die. No staying quiet, we stand united. We're rooted to the ground, can't tear us down. We're here to stay. Thank you.
Good morning from Pacific Climate Change Centre here at Sprepin, Samoa. My name is Tana and I will be your moderator for today. And let me begin in my own language, please. Hofi tau whaalofa lahi kia tau turuosi, ne kua mai ki ke whakalataha mai, fuluala nei ne kua tau siusia I hia tua. Honourable Prime Minister of the Government of the Cook Islands, Prime Minister Mark Brown, Deputy Prime Minister of the Government of Fiji, the Honourable Laya Said Kayum, Honourable Minister of Finance, Government of Tuvalu, the Honourable Seve Painu, Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Environment of Palau, the Honourable Stephen Victor, Honourable Minister of Finance of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Honourable Alfred Jr., distinguished national heads of delegation, national climate change focal points, representatives, our partners, as well as the Pacific wider family. It is my honor on behalf of the One Crop team to welcome you all to the official launch and commencement of the Pacific Political Climate Change Champion for Climate Change for the UNFCCC COP26 and throughout the next year. Before we formally start, I would like to request that you turn on your cameras to allow our team to take a virtual group photo of this momentous occasion. Spanish embassy. Is it done? Smile. Oh, sorry. I've been asked to ask you beautiful people to smile, please. And on the count of 3, Leanne, please count down. Yes.
Right, everybody, big smiles on 3 and hold 1, 2, 3.
Is that it? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I would like to now invite to deliver the opening remarks, the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, Mr. Henry Puna. SG, you have the floor.
Honourable Mark Brown, Prime Minister of the Cook Islands and Champion for Climate Finance. The Honourable Ayaz Sayed Kayum, Deputy Prime Minister, Attorney General and Minister of Economy for Fiji, our Champion for Oceans and Climate Finance. Honourable Seve Painu, Minister of Finance for Tuvalu, Champion for Loss and Damage. Honourable Stephen Victor, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Environment for the Republic of Palau, Champion for Environmental Integrity. Senior officials and negotiators, One Crop executives and officials, ladies and gentlemen. Bulavinaka, Kia orana, and good morning. Allow me to convey on behalf of forum members and crop colleagues our sincere appreciation to you, Excellencies, and your respective governments for stepping forward to champion our Pacific priorities at COP26. For our Blue Pacific, no world meeting is more important than COP26. The stakes are high because climate change is an existential threat to our people. And we know this COP is the final opportunity to keep the 1.5 degrees threshold within reach and avoid a tipping point of no return. At the current warming level of 1.2 degrees, our seas are rising, our oceans are warming, and extreme events are more frequent and severe. On this current trajectory, we are on track for a climate catastrophe. Our very future, therefore, is at stake. That is why COP26 is so critical. World leaders, like our Pacific leaders, must affirm climate change as the single greatest threat facing all humanity and act with urgency to implement the Paris Agreement. To mobilize global political will for decisive climate action and influence a strong legacy COP26 outcome that reflects our regional priorities, our Pacific voice must be heard louder in Glasgow, and we must be represented in the negotiating rooms at the senior political level. In recognition of the fact that not all Pacific Island countries will participate at COP26 at the senior political level, your CROP agencies initiated the proposal for political climate champions to represent our collective voice. I am pleased to confirm that your role has been endorsed by our Pacific leaders. Honorable champions, let me underscore that the approach respects and acknowledges the sovereign rights of your countries and is sensitive to your national priorities. But we also know that we are stronger together. As our political climate champions, you will raise our collective voice by advocating and influencing decision-making at COP26 on issues of critical importance to our region, guided by Pacific Island Forum leaders' Kainaki Lua Declaration for Urgent Climate Change Action Now, and the latest Pacific ACP leaders' statement on COP26 for a 1.5 degree world. To the international community, my message to you is this: climate change is a matter of survival for us, and every day of inaction brings us one step closer to a perilous future, which could see many of our homes disappear. We have appointed our COP26 climate champions because we want to influence a COP26 outcome that finalizes the Paris rulebook, keeps 1.5 degrees within reach, delivers on the 100 billion climate finance goal, provides dedicated financing for loss and damage, concludes a negotiation on the markets mechanism, and advances work on the ocean in the UNFCCC. We call for your support to our climate champions, because only a global solution could address the climate crisis facing us. In closing, let me assure our honorable champions of the unwavering support from all forum members and your CROP agencies in the lead up to, at COP26 and post-COP. We're all committed to make your engagement a success, and some of us will be there in person in Glasgow to support you. You are our Pacific people's beacon of hope, and our prayers are with you on your journey to Glasgow. God bless, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, for those stark reminders and also for introducing our political champions for the COP26. I would now like to invite the Director General of the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, Leota Kosilatu, to deliver his remarks on the joint work undertaken to support meaningful engagement of the Pacific Small Island Developing States who are parties to the convention.
Thank you very much, Tangaloa. Ta'alofa, and good morning from the Pacific Climate Change Center here at SPREP, Samoa. Could I acknowledge the Honorable Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, Mr. Mark Brown? Could I also acknowledge all of our ministers from the region and political champions? Could I also acknowledge the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, Mr. Henry Puna, and of course my crop colleagues, the Directors General of FFA and SPC. I'd like to acknowledge also the members of the Diplomatic Corps, our partners, our National Climate Change Focal Points, negotiators, and members of the One Crop Plus team, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to, first of all, echo what the Secretary General has said in his speech. And there are a few things that I said that I was going to mention, but I'm happy that he has said that. And I want to thank the Secretary General for that very important message. Can I also thank our political champions who have put up their hands to be the voice for our region at this very important COP. As we all know, it's been 2 years since we've had our last COP25 in Madrid. COVID, of course, has not made it possible for us to meet again since Madrid. But we, of course, are very excited and happy for the opportunity to be in Glasgow in October, November of this year. Many of our countries will finally have the opportunity to meet with the global community and hopefully be able to agree on a global approach to address the very important issue of climate change. As the Secretary General had mentioned, COP26 will be the opportunity for us to complete the work on the Paris Rulebook so that it is fit for purpose and ready for implementation in the beginning of 2022. Many of us are also aware of the recent IPCC report, which has highlighted the urgency of immediately reducing emissions in order to keep the Paris goal at 1.5 Celsius within reach. It is, of course, very important for us and critical for the Pacific voice and requirements to be embedded in the Paris Rulebook, as our very existence, as many of you have stated on many occasions, dependent on an effective system which pushes for the highest possible climate ambition. We look forward to COP26 as an opportunity for the global community to raise their levels of ambition. And in that regard, our participation at COP26 is vital. Under normal circumstances, of course, our participation at international fora has always been small in scale compared to the larger, wealthier, developed nations. Financing has and will continue to limit our level of participation and engagement. Despite the fact that COVID has compounded our circumstances and has brought to all of us health and safety issues, border closures, stringent international travel requirements, which has further hampered our abilities to travel and to engage meaningfully at COP26. We, as a region, have decided and have made the right decision to be at COP26 to enable our voice to be heard. Throughout the past 2 years, we have remained steadfast in ensuring that we maintain and that we carry forward the momentum from Madrid. SPREP, in collaboration with our One Crop family and in partnership with Climate Analytics, have continually sought to ensure that our negotiators from the region are not only given the requisite tools, training, but also the guidance requested by our member countries. This approach has been highly strategic and coordinated to ensure a sequential roster of events in the lead up to, during, and after COP26. This roster includes a number of key events, such as the post-COP25 analysis workshop, which we had earlier this year, the PSIT's virtual preparatory meeting for the Intersessional Climate Conference, which we also had this year, the PSIT's UK high-level climate dialogue, which we've had, of course, with the UK presidency and various UK ambassadors for COP26. The also specific COP26 workshop for climate negotiators, PSIT's COP26 profiling series, and culminating in this official launch of COP26 Political Climate Champions event, to be rounded off with the Pacific COP26 preparatory meeting, which is happening immediately after this launch. Let me conclude by just reassuring our political champions once again of the support that you have from your One Crop family. We are there to support you. And so you can be reassured that your officials, your crop agencies are going to do their utmost best to provide you with the support that is needed to enable you to profile our issues, to be the voice of the region at COP26. So thank you very much once again to all of our political champions and all of our leaders who have made the effort to be champions at COP26. Whamtai, and thank you very much.
I thank you, Director General Atu. Thank you for your very kind remarks and reaffirming the commitment of the One Crop team to this initiative and to our political champions. At this juncture, colleagues, honorable ministers, Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, we will have a very enlightening poem but let me first start by saying we were asked by our countries to, at every opportunity, every turn possible, find opportunities for us to tell our stories. For COP26, we also weave the message through our voice, through images and messages from artists from across our region in order to amplify the Pacific voice through emotive and artistic content. To do that, I'm really excited on behalf of the One Crop to say that we are working very closely with New Zealand and Storybox to bring to the COP, as well as the Mana Moana Collective, which is a partnership with New Zealand government, to bring to the COP our voice in arts in order to amplify our message as well. So in addition to the negotiations, we will have our voice amplified in the Arts Collective. I would like to invite Dr. Carlo Miller, who is a New Zealand-born poet of Tongan Pākehā descent with ancestral connections to Samoa. She is currently the Program Director of Mana Moana Leadership, New Zealand. Dr. Carlo, you have the floor.
Māloa Lele from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, locked down in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's an absolute privilege and pleasure to be here. I'm going to read for you a poem called Poem for the Commonwealth. I was invited to read at the Pacific Forum by the Commonwealth Foundation at Chogham, London, 2018. It's just an excerpt. The Commonwealth. Some days it does not feel like we've inherited riches or commonwealth, rather common problems. Although we gather to speak of fairer futures, truth be told, it is fear of the future that we most have in common. I did not come to sing a siren song on the sinking ship of empire. I come to sing of sinking islands in the South Pacific on the blue continent where I come from, where what is at stake is the very land we stand on. The earth itself rejects us. It reneges its responsibilities. It is retreating back into the deep. And if the ocean could speak in that choked, overheated throat, gagged with plastic bags in the way she once spoke to us, and we could listen, she would say, too much salt on her tongue. She would say, rising with a surety we have never seen before. She would say, enough. If we ever needed to wake from our sleep and hear the call of the Commonwealth, it is now. The islands of Oceania, Kiribati, Tuvalu, Samoa, Tonga, Vanuatu, we are the canaries in the coal mines of climate change, singing and ringing the unruly bells, beating the big drums, and yet drowned out. So here we gather, the call of the Commonwealth, but it is the uncommonwealth that may save us, schooled out of us in lost languages, beaten out of the mouths of children. There lie the answers in cultures that hold a wealth of knowledge, intergenerational meditations on what it means to be alive, what it means to survive in a certain set of conditions, specific parameters of earth and sea and sky. Each of us holding a long gestated piece of the puzzle of how to be human and thrive. It is the heart of who we are, how we see the world to be. Let us share. My people have always known that we are all relatives, common ancestors, the same stardust in all of our bones, the rocks, the trees, the leaves, all of these, our relatives, all of us part of the family of things. And one ancestral word at a time, we are salvaging what has been savaged, these backward ways of being in the world that may take us forward, that wake us up to all that we are dependent upon, that open our eyes while the giants sleep. Science seems to take such a long time to catch up. Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist, can confirm the lettuce is our distant cousin, but the stories we live by have not changed. If we were truly to reorient to life as relatives, commonwealth would mean more than what we might cling to in the face of a dangerous and uncertain future. So let us not use the word commonwealth to try and insulate fate with the soft fur of fine feathered friends. No, let us spread our wings to a much wider vision than that. It may be the end of the world as we know it, but let us not fear the remaking of another one. Let us create an atmosphere of kindness and love for even the air we breathe, fresh water, trees, people, and ocean. Let us create a great place to raise a family, for therein lies the fate of an extraordinary family of relatives, where what we have in common is all of us. Malo.
Aftai tele lava, Dr. Carlo Miller, for very moving words and for sharing our collective voice through the spoken word. Thank you. And we look forward to working with Storybox as we lead into the COP very soon. Thank you again. This brings us now ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues, distinguished representatives, this brings us now to the conversation that we've all been looking for, to the talanoa with our high-level political champions. And I know that you are all busy and you've all got your own national priorities to get back to, so we will try not to keep you much longer. I just wanted to highlight, however, that we will be asking a question to each one of our high-level political champions. And then at the end of the question session, we will take some questions from our audience. We have well over 100 participants online. And in addition to that, we have in some of our countries multiple participants in single rooms. So we will take some questions at the end of this for our high-level political champions. So please bear with us. It is my distinct pleasure, therefore, to begin this conversation, or talanoa, by asking the political champion for climate finance, Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, the Honourable Prime Minister Mark Brown. As a political, kia ora, lovely to see you, Honourable Prime Minister. Can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear.
Wonderful. Kia ora. The question that we have for you is this: as a political champion, what are your key priorities and expectations for COP26 for the theme that you champion? What are your key priorities and expectations?
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that. Before I start, let me just congratulate Carlo. What a brilliant poem that you've given out to us to really set the tone for us at this quick meeting that we're having here. Thank you very much for that. I've been finance minister now for 11 years, going into my 12th year. And for me, dealing with climate finance, right from its inceptions of the early days of the Green Climate Fund to where we are today. I think the first thing that we have to do is reaffirm that COVID-19 is not an excuse for developed countries, parties, to delay the provision of scaled up finance for developing countries as required under the Articles 9.1 and 9.3 of the Paris Agreement. We've seen economies ravaged by COVID, we've seen countries ravaged by COVID, but equally we've seen many of these countries display positive growth in terms of their economy. There is no excuse for them to not be able to contribute. If we look at the amount for the Green Climate Fund, it's $100 billion a year. That was the commitment made by developed countries to assist countries like ours. That represents 0.12% of the global GDP. It is a fraction. If I compare what I spend in my country on climate mitigation and climate adaptation measures, it would be close to 5 to 6% of my own national GDP. So we spend far more than what the globe is being asked to provide on a per capita basis, on a ratio basis. Richer countries that we see are able to use economics such as quantitative easing, which essentially is printing more money to help them out. Whereas countries like ours, particularly in the Pacific, small island developing states, we're forced to look at borrowing to be able to protect our countries against the impacts of climate change. This message, this continued way of trying to address these climate issues has to change. We cannot continue to look at borrowing as a means for countries like us who are being disadvantaged from climate change. Over the last 12 years, I've witnessed three of the most intense tropical cyclones occurred over the last 3 to 4 years. Fiji has been a victim of a couple of them, same as Vanuatu, same as Tonga. Now, in my own country, we've had a spate of floods in just one of our islands that have reached homes that have never been flooded before. So climate change is occurring to us. These measures, these issues are hitting us now. we're spending money to the tune of millions of dollars to protect these homes that are being impacted right now. We need developed countries to stump up with the money that's required, and not in a way through a loan, because all you're doing is adding debt to debt distressed countries, but in a way that we've been asking for many, many years now, for grant funding to be provided to build resilience and strength. So that's my 1 minute, I guess. It's gone. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister. You are the Prime Minister. You can have more minutes if you would like. But thank you very much for your perspective, and I guess it is critical at this stage to have an expert voice on finance and a real understanding of the benefits of grant funding versus the loans that we're being forced to pursue. So thank you very much for your perspective, and we're looking forward to working with you throughout the next year. I asked the question next, and I see he is online. The next question, and can I just remind everyone, these questions are questions from the constituency that you all now represent. And so we've looked at a few and thought these are the ones that have really come to us as questions important that they would like to ask. So in that regard, our second question is for the political champion on oceans, the Honourable Ayaz Said Kayum, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Climate Change of Fiji.
Bula Vinaka, and thank you for having us. I'd like to, of course, acknowledge our Prime Minister, Mr. Brown, and the Secretary General Pips, and all the other excellencies that are there. Thank you very much for the invitation. I think just, being cognizant of the time of 1 minute, I think, in respect of oceans, we need to generate, obviously, support for Oceans Work Programme in the agenda in the UNFCCC processes in line with the Oceans Pathway. We need to, of course, push for the blue components of NDCs to be promoted and tracked, generate support for further research and capacity building to enhance developing countries' understanding of the ocean climate nexus. Indeed, the developed countries also need to have a better understanding of it too, and see the nexus. Enhance financing for oceans and fisheries-related adaptation activities. Discuss options for implementing the recommendations of the 2020 Ocean Climate Dialogue Report recommendations co-chaired by Fiji earlier on. And of course, any additional commitments to ocean-related initiatives, such as the Ocean Pathway, was launched at COP26, and the 30 by 30 challenge led by the UK. I think the UK will obviously be pushing for the 30 by 30, and a couple of the other Pacific Island countries have made commitments for that. And there's obviously a lot of benefit for us in the 30 by 30. And again, as an adjunct to what the Honourable Prime Minister was saying, there could be financing available through the 30 by 30 initiative. We have recently, for example, talked about blue bonds and how that can be linked in. But as the PM has said that, pricing is critically important. It's not just about grant funding, but it's also about concessional financing. It's also ensuring that we get the right mix between mitigation and adaptation. And the amount of funding available for adaptation is very little compared to what is available for mitigation. And we in the Pacific obviously are the coalface of climate change, and therefore there should be more emphasis on adaptation. Thank you.
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very, very much for those important perspectives. I think it is, as large ocean states, we're confident with you at the helm on this issue. And I think it is always important to reiterate that we are custodians of the largest oceans. So thank you very much for your expertise in this area. The third question is for our political champion for loss and damage, the Honourable Seve Ainu, Minister of Finance and Climate Change for Tuvalu. Honourable Minister, if you are online, could you please unmute?
Talofa and greetings.
Talofa, Honourable Minister. The question that we have for you is, what types of activities will you be undertaking as our Pacific High-Level Champion for Loss and Damage? And what impact do you hope to make in these activities?
Thank you, Tangaloa. I just wanted to say that I've taken time out from, we are celebrating our 43rd independence anniversary this week, but happy to come online and have a Talanoa dialogue session with colleagues. And indeed, the climate crisis is real and presents an existential threat and a human security challenge to PICITs. It particularly threatens the very existence of many small and low-lying atoll nations, such as Tuvalu. Given the present levels of global warming, and even if we as a global community is able to bring us to a 1.5-degree trajectory, our adaptation costs will still be very enormous. Therefore, the key issues for PICITs revolve around not only, as has been said by the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Fiji, raising climate ambition, but the need to have sufficiently large climate finance to assist us prepare for and deal with loss and damage. PICITs require enormous amount of climate finance to build more resilient infrastructure. And by way of illustration purposes, Tuvalu has a small pilot coastal protection project funded by the Green Climate Fund worth $36 million US. However, Tuvalu requires significantly large amounts of climate finance, and for coastal protection alone, upwards of $300 million. The climate finance mechanisms need to offer a special funding window to account for the unique vulnerabilities and capacities of small low-lying nations. And my final key message, and this is a new concept I would like to bring to the table, bringing climate change and climate finance to the development paradigm. So a more development-focused approach to climate financing, for instance. This concept is also a chance to tackle so many of the development and planning headaches we suffer in our overcrowded urban atoll environments, and plan fundamental services from the ground up to make people's lives better. Nowadays, we see young people who are educated and are embracing change. They want white-collar jobs, they want safe housing, reliable power, safe water, internet. They care deeply about their traditions, but they are looking forward to make things better in their homeland. We can make this concept of reclamation or long-term adaptation something our young folks would want to pursue, even if there was no specter of sea level rise. It can be a better future model for development in our urban atolls. I would like to bring this philosophy into the designs of land reclamation and rehabilitation, and make the islands a place of our young people will want to live on, and not just a last resort option we are forced into. And there goes my 1 minute. Tangalo.
Thank you so much, Honourable Minister. I feel like the keeper of the 1 minute slots. Thank you very much for those very insightful comments and introduction of new concept. We continue to work with Tuvalu on the development of the PICF and hope that we make progress in loss and damage, and look forward to the conversation at Glasgow. And as Pacific Island people, I can say, as we're invested in our region, I do hope that we are able to maintain our lands that would make our young people proud, just as we have inherited them. Whawhitai Lasi. Now we move to the North Pacific. Honourable Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Honourable Ministers, high-level political champions. I would like to now invite the high-level political champion for environmental integrity, the Honourable Stephen Victor, Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries and Environment from the Government of Palau. Our question today is for you, Honourable Minister, is as a political champion, what are your key priorities for the theme that you champion? Honourable Minister, you have the
Thank you for the question. We are having a bit of internet issues this morning as we speak. There's a storm brewing to the east of us. This is quite early time for storm, so we're actually experiencing climate change as we speak. But Honourable Prime Minister Brown, Honourable champions, and Honourable Director General for crop agencies and officials and everyone. We head into Glasgow with optimism and strongest commitment to ensuring that the Paris Agreement negotiations are completed. However, this means that we must present and ensure that the voices of our Pacific people are not left behind in one of the most difficult aspects of the negotiations. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is still unresolved. It is the article responsible for the breakdown of talks in Madrid. Our task as country technical negotiators and the champion on environmental integrity ensures that Article 6 on carbon markets and other incentives, investment promotes sustainable development and uphold environmental integrity. As the champion for environmental integrity, it is my responsibility to work with fellow Pacific leaders, ministers, and head of delegations to support our delegation technical negotiators and through the support of the One Crop Plus on matters pertaining to Article 6. This means ensuring an outcome that is consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and ensuring adequate share of proceeds from the market mechanisms for adaptation activities in developing countries. There are 9 key messages I will promote as part of Article 6 negotiations. 1, avoiding double counting. Negotiations must uphold and ensure there is a common international accounting framework to ensure no double counting or claiming of reductions takes place, as well as to ensure transparency. Second, overall mitigation in global emissions. The negotiations must deliver a substantial overall mitigation in global emissions with application of percentage, cancellation rate, at issuance. Third, include and ensure share of proceeds to finance adaptation. It is essential that the final rulebook includes and ensures a substantial share of proceeds to finance adaptation, particularly in vulnerable developing country parties. Fourth, incentives to raise ambition. It is essential that the rulebook creates opportunities and positive incentives to support mitigation ambition, while avoiding incentives that run contrary to the principles and goals of the Paris Agreement. 6, ensuring rapid operationalization. Pacific supports the operationalization of Article 6.8. Needs to be made promptly and without any further undue delay. 7, Kyoto Protocol transition, specifically express position against the transitions of units from the Kyoto Protocol. And 8, non-market approach, call for a prompt start to work program avoiding duplication of efforts. We support and promote nature-based solution. And finally, capacity building under Article 6. recognizing and addressing the special circumstances of seats with respect to meeting participation requirements under Article 6.2, providing capacity building for all developing countries and developing training programs to recruit people to train to participate in the Article 6 technical expert review teams. Those are some of the key priorities that I will advocate for at COP26. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for that with that detailed list of 9 priorities that you will advocate. We do hope to see that some of the proceeds gained under Article 6 will be able to indeed finance adaptation that is very much needed in our region. But thank you very much, Honourable Minister Victor, for your intervention just now. Colleagues, high-level champions, I would like to move to our final political champion, and at the outset, introduce him. Our high-level political champion for the Republic of the Marshall Islands is unable to join us right now, but he will be represented by the Special Climate Change Envoy, Ambassador, Her Excellency Tina Steeg. But I would like to take the opportunity to introduce the high-level climate champion for the Republic of Marshall Islands. He will champion the cause of climate ambition, and he is the Honourable Alfred Jr., the Minister of Finance for the Republic of the Marshall Islands. As he is unable to join us this morning, he has been replaced, and the speaker who will speak on the behalf of the Minister is Her Excellency Tina Steeg. And I believe she is online right now. There she is, Tina Yakwe.
Yakwe.
Thank you for joining us, Tina. The question that we did have for the Honourable Minister was, which world leader would you most want to share an elevator with at COP26? And what would be your climate ambition advice to them and the international community?
Well, first of all, Komotada, thank you, Tangaloa. I really want to say it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here amongst all of you, with much respect to the Prime Minister and the ministers, and apologies from Minister Alfred, who is actually with his constituents on an outer island with no internet access at the moment, which is the reason he could not join us. But as Marshall Islands, we have been at the forefront, along with all of those of us in our region, raising the voice for ambition. And that will not change at this COP. In fact, if anything, we must be louder and stronger in everything we do and say. And in terms of ambition, I think it's going to be extremely important that we leave no stone unturned, as they say, particularly to ensure that we have ambition across all pillars of the Paris Agreement: mitigation, adaptation, and finance. And then we've also heard from our esteemed colleague from Tuvalu on the needs in terms of loss and damage. And I had the privilege of just returning from the pre-COP in Milan. And it was I think, generally positive meeting with all of those who were able to be there in person. But certainly, I think we saw that there were those who could not be there, particularly from our region. due to ongoing restrictions from COVID. And it is going to be key that those of us who can be there at the COP itself are able to show up and be present in person, to have those elevator conversations. And I think we all understand who we need to have those with. It is the members of the G20 who really hold the fate of the world in their hands at this point, accounting for 80% of the emissions. And the biggest emitters are those who we're going to have to be speaking directly to. I think that we will need to speak with those who are the most progressive and ambitious and who can help champion our cause. And certainly the Marshall Islands, as the convener of the High Ambition Coalition, has attempted to set up a group that will provide a platform for all of those who are the most ambitious, not just from our region, but from all the regions of the world, so that we can join together and really push for a 1.5 world, the world that we need. And we're hearing, I think, very good signals from some of our partners in this regard. We just recently heard additional finance from the United States being pledged, and China made its announcement just a couple of weeks ago on ending international coal financing. Those are steps forward. We have much farther to go. And we will need to continue pushing those major emitters to make those kinds of not just steps, but leaps forward to get to where we need to be. So we can't leave any stone unturned. We must be speaking to all, but in particularly those who are part of the G20, who are going to be able to make the most difference at this COP. And I think we can do that if we're all together, just as this effort is showing, with unity from our region, speaking with one voice. So with that, I say como tada and thank you for the opportunity to represent the Marshall Islands at this event.
Your Excellency, como tata, and thank you for generously stepping in. I'm going to now, and I would like to also say thank you for your representation at the Youth Pre-COP in Milan. I have a question a bit later in that regard, and I have received some questions here before me to go to some of our leaders. And the first question that I had was for the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister of the Cook Islands. It has been said, Honorable Prime Minister, that the Pacific has a moral authority on issues pertaining to climate change. Would you agree? And what would you do to advance that moral authority on a global stage? Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that question. I think it's been said earlier, it's said before that countries in the Pacific, a large proportion, small island states, countries that are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. You know, we didn't put the carbon into the atmosphere. We didn't put the plastic into our oceans. We didn't do any of these things that are now coming to hurt us first and hurt us the hardest. So we do have authority to make a claim, to make a statement on the global stage. There is an obligation on those countries that are the largest carbon emitters to do what they can to assist countries like us. It's just last week, speaking to the UN Secretary General as part of the Pacific Islands Forum leaders, I was standing on our northernmost island in that address. And that statement that I made on that island was particularly pertinent because it was to push a recognition of our maritime borders despite our countries being overcome by the ocean with the rising of with the warming of the climate, that we still be recognized as nations, even though there is no land left that has been subsumed by the ocean. So these are really powerful statements to make, particularly when you talk on the islands themselves to the Secretary General of the United Nations on these issues, with your people listening to you as you're speaking about the reality that they face, that their island may be covered by the ocean. And here we are asking for it to still be recognized when it disappears under the waves. So to me, that gives us all the legal authority, all the moral authority to be able to make these statements, to be able to make these demands that developed countries need to do what they can to reduce their carbon emissions. But on top of that, they have an obligation to help us, assist us build resilience in our countries to be able to survive the impacts of climate change that we are seeing already. Thank you.
Me taki ma'ata, Honourable Prime Minister, very true words. And I think what we do lack in these spaces, particularly in the global spaces, is any discussion about the traditional early warning systems we have in all of our countries, because we have just become accustomed to dealing with severe weather. And what more pertinent place, geographical location to be in to make that stance. So thank you very, very much. And I do see a few comments. People have reacted very positively to your statement and your response. The next question I have is for the Honourable Minister of Palau. A question has been put to us by the floor. Are you able to track progress of adaptation efforts in the agriculture sector in your country, and has that been done?
So I've been in the office for 3 months, and one of the key challenges we face is really being able to track just even the progress of local production. And so it is one of our key priorities to establish those metrics that we're able to track our progress in production, but also be able to then determine whether our progress is going to be impacted by what we see as potential impact of changes in weather pattern, as well as other climate related industries such as typhoon. For example, in March this year, Palau was hit by Typhoon Surigay that we would have never expected to be impacted by typhoon during that time of the year, as it's never happened in the history of Palau. So these are things that we are beginning to experience, and lack of systems in place to be able for us to track those impact. And so it is a priority for us to be developing those. So we know that farmers are impacted, but as far as to what extent, we're not able to do that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Thank you very much for that response. And can I just move very quickly? I've been reminded that we're running out of time, but please, I've also made it quite clear that I will not stop our political champions for taking the floor. This is your time, and everybody has turned up to listen to you. So please, I have the question to the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji. Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, what will you do to convince the G20 to ensure the $100 billion USD target is achieved, while simultaneously getting reaffirmation from them that they will move to phase out coal over the next few years?
Gosh, I need 1 hour for that.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to pick up a point on what the Honourable Prime Minister said. I think the fact of the matter is that whilst we're the cold face of climate change, and indeed that makes us the victims, whilst not actually having an input into that particular process, I think what also will give us the moral authority is our ability to also to demonstrate to the world that we're also committed to reducing carbon. So I think it's critically important in our own countries. I know some countries in the Pacific, for example, have banned styrofoam or banned plastic. And, we need to do that. We, for example, need to show commitment in terms of, net zero emissions by 2050. So we can go to, COP26 and say, look, even though we have not contributed to the carbon footprint, even though we are the cold face, we are still committed ourselves to our NDCs. We are still committed to net zero emissions. We are still committed to nature-based solutions. And I think that becomes also even more powerful and gives us that level of authority to say, look, we are also doing it. And some of you big people, some of you big economies, you are not doing it, but we are doing it. And I think that gives you the moral authority and the voice to speak out, above everybody else. So in a way, it's kind of shaming them into that position. And we have seen, obviously, a wave of change now at the global sort of level with America sort of, rebouncing into the multilateralism space and with the current Biden government's commitment. And we have seen, for example, now recently, Australia has made some very positive noises regarding the 2050 net zero emissions. So I think we need to capitalize on that. And that's why we need to go together as one voice. And I think if we have that one voice, be able to speak to the G20 in that respect. I think there's also, unfortunately for a lot of people, when you talk commercial sense, when you talk about, commercial viability, they get more attracted to that as opposed to sometimes the moral sort of, inclinations of them. And it is clearly shown that if you have, renewable energy, if you, for example, are able to adapt now and build into the mitigation space also, it's a commercially viable proposition. Your cost of energy actually comes down. I was just watching last night something on ABC where this gentleman in Australia has done a final analysis. And essentially what he's saying is that it will create, X number of million jobs if you actually get into the space of, adapting to climate change, making sure that, for example, with mitigation measures. So our message to the G20 also should be, apart from the sort of the fact that we are the victims of the huge carbon output by the developed countries. We also have the moral authority in respect of notwithstanding that we also put in place all these measures ourselves. So, you should be ashamed of that. And thirdly, of course, is that we have, it makes a lot of commercial sense to do this. It will also build sustainability into your own economies. I mean, as we've seen, the pandemic, etc., has meant job losses, not just in our countries that are, for example, tourism-based, but also in a lot of the developed countries themselves. So they need to look at new alternatives. They need to look at, changing consumer mindsets as to what they want to consume and how they're going to consume those things that they're actually consuming. So, it does not make sense, for example, to have coal-fired, generation. You can't have that because it's not sustainable in the long term. It may be cheap alternative at the moment, but it's not sustainable from an economic perspective, from a health perspective. So we need to make this case to the G20 too. If that's time enough, I'll probably end there, but I'm quite happy to take any other questions regarding that. But I think it's a package that we need to talk to them about.
Thank you very much, Honourable Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister. And I think the suite of high-level and caliber of high-level champions we have here, we trust that package will indeed be amplified. That package will definitely have all the rights to it. So thank you. And also to make mention and reflect on your comments about it is not logical to keep mining coal. But also I think we've been trying to generate the conversation about the clean economies, the creation of new jobs, and I agree with you. There is a lot of benefit to be gained. And I think in all of the messaging that we're hearing today, there is hope to keep 1.5 alive. And I think as a One Pacific, we have to hold to that 1.5. I have a question before me for the Honourable Minister of Tuvalu, the Honourable Seve Painu. And the question has been put for you is, can you speak to the challenges that you and your delegation face in attending a face-to-face COP, and also in the face of the COVID-19 restrictions?
Yes, we are still figuring it out, how we're going to get to Glasgow. Obviously, there has been a lot of disruptions in terms of international travel. That's a reality now we face. So it's a challenge for all of us from the Pacific, how to find our way across the Pacific and into the Northern Europe. And the protocols, the COVID travel protocols, also challenging. And in terms of quarantine restrictions that countries are putting up. So we are still working out our travel itinerary. Hopefully we can make it to Glasgow. And even coming back, it is a challenge for us. Obviously, it's going to take us quite a bit of time in terms of quarantine, the transit, the layovers. So certainly, I think that applies for everyone in the Pacific, where we do not have regular, reliable flights. And therefore, it's an ongoing challenge for us. However, that's a reality we all now facing. But aside then COP26, we are continuing to address our own set of challenges within our own countries. And for that, we have a number of obstacles to overcome and to address, and I believe that is also shared by other leaders across the Pacific. So for us, we need to keep on the fight, be strong, be courageous, and be loud when we get to Glasgow, so that we can let them hear our voice loud and clear.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. And there are a few of our countries share the same challenges that you are, but I know that they are being worked through at the moment as we speak. Thank you very much for sharing that reality as well, and the challenges the Pacific faces in a fair and equitable representation at the COP. And the last question for high-level champions is to the Special Envoy for Climate Change for the Marshall Islands. And this is about the youth, because you have attended the pre-COP in Milan. Her Excellency is on right, I can see her. What advice can you provide to help the next generation of forum leaders by 2030 or 2050 cope with the climate anxiety that they are living today? What advice would you give to them?
Thank you for that question, Tangaloa. And it's something that, honestly, I've been thinking about for years now, because the Marshall Islands back in 2019 worked very closely with the UN Secretary General's team on youth and public mobilization as part of the Climate Ambition Summit for that year. And for those of you who may remember, Tony de Broom back in 2015 at the Paris talks had with him Selena Lean, who was at that point the youngest delegate to attend the negotiation. She was just 15. And in 2019, she joined me at the Climate Ambition Summit as one of our youth delegates to attend. And most recently, she was there again with me at the Youth for Climate event just this past week in Milan. She's fully matured in her activism, in her poetry, and in so many of the ways that she represents the Marshall Islands. And I would say that perhaps that is the first point of departure, is to stand with our youth and reflect back to them the strength and the resilience and the absolute power that they bring to what we do in our advocacy, and just remember to appreciate them for all of the work that they are doing for this cause, because it really is an enormous amount that we're asking of them to bear. And it is true that there is anxiety and grief that comes along with that work. And many of them are so young, and we really need to support them and stand with them and stand behind them in all of the advocacy that they do. So I think that that's just the beginning, is just that's the best way to put it. But in Marshallese, we say "ipendroan," to be together. You know, there is strength in standing together. There's strength in overcoming anxiety together. So it was really such a privilege for me to be at the Youth for Climate event just last week, and not just hear from Selena, but others who were there from the Pacific, who were standing as they have done and for so many years now, and raising their voices, but youth from around the world, from Sudan and all the various nations of Africa, from all the most vulnerable communities, supporting each other in that event, and really putting the message to the leaders that they were tired of hearing words. Words just won't cut it. From what we need now in this decade is action. And their voices were reflected back over and over again in the days following that event at the pre-COP, because it was impossible to ignore what they had said. So I hope that for those of you who can, we will be bringing our youth delegates with us to the COP. I know that there are challenges and it's difficult, and travel is hard on everyone. But I think we all know that our youth are some of our most effective voices from a region that has been the most effective in its storytelling. So I hope that we can all bring youth along with us as we go into this fight. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those remarks. And yes, we also share the importance of modeling for our young people. But I also think there is, I should say, much to learn from them as well. So thank you very much, Komo Tata. Can I move us quickly to the summary of key messages by Dr. Stewart Minchin, the Director General for the Secretariat of the Pacific Community. DG, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be quite quick in summarising this, as we're over time. I'd like to acknowledge all of our climate change champions. I won't acknowledge you individually, but it's been wonderful listening to the messages that you've shared with the audience. The seriousness of the implications of climate change in the Pacific have been well articulated by you today, and as have also some of the required and possible solutions. Your leadership and willingness to champion these issues for the region is testament to your conviction to ensuring a better outcome for tomorrow, or remaking a better world, in the words of the poet laureate Carlo Miller. It's notable and concerning from an ethical perspective that the Pacific contributes minimally in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but are and will continue to bear a disproportionate burden of climate change impacts. Our champion, the PM of the Cook Islands, highlighted that COVID is not an excuse for reducing action on climate change by developed countries. He also highlighted the really important issue of the need for climate finance grants and not loans to the SIDS. The Honourable Deputy PM of Fiji, who's our Ocean Climate Nexus champion, focused on the mix between mitigation and adaptation, and it not being right at the moment, much more balanced towards mitigation than adaptation. And highlighted as well the importance and the opportunity of actually committing ourselves to a low carbon future in our region, not just because it gives us the moral authority at COP, but it also can create jobs and economic growth for our region. The Honourable Minister from Tuvalu highlighted the importance of development-focused approaches to climate finance, not just taking climate finance to bring us back to a normal situation, but actually viewing this as an opportunity to lift our whole region significantly into a better world for our youth. The Honourable Minister from Palau highlighted the importance of fair and transparent accounting and the importance of we don't have double counting or by countries in the climate negotiations. Also the importance of nature-based solutions. And our special climate envoy from RMI highlighted that having G20 leaders in an elevator would be great. We need to focus on those with high ambition, and the importance of standing with our youth in assisting them with this challenge in the future. So just to reassure you, SPC, as the largest science and technical pool capacity in the region, will continue to do our best in collaboration with our crop brothers and sisters to support your efforts in championing these issues and finding the resources and implementing solutions in the future. We've taken a lead role in One Crop Plus on the oceans, supporting our Fiji champion in the excellent work and championing our Oceans and Climate Nexus work. We're doing this in coordination with all of the crop agencies and relevant partners in the region. And finally, COP26 is going to be challenging for the PCIDS because of the challenge of travel and representation. It's especially important that the champions be supported and in turn provide that political support to the negotiators that are present. The role that you as climate champions have taken on is critical in ensuring a strong Pacific voice at COP26, and we all thank you for it. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, DG SPC, for those summary points of on point. I now ask the Director General of the Foreign Fisheries Agency, Dr. Manu Tuporumsen, to also bring our launch, this event, special event, to a close with her closing remarks. Thank you. Dr. Manu.
Thank you very much, Director Tangaloa, our moderator. Honourable Mark Brown, Prime Minister of Cook Islands. Honourable Ayez Sayed Kayum, Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji. Honourable Stephen Victor, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Environment of the Republic of Palau. Honourable Seve Painiu, Minister of Finance of Tuvalu. Your Excellency Tina Stage, Special Envoy for Climate Change for the Republic of Marshall Islands. Members of the Diplomatic Corps and partners, senior officials, fellow crop executives and staff. On behalf of our crop family, it is an honor to provide closing remarks to this high-level launch of our Pacific Political Champions. The Pacific Political Climate Champions are an integral component of our approach to COP26 to ensure our key climate messages are amplified on the world stage. Our Pacific leaders and yourselves have identified our 5 Pacific priorities, which you, our champions, will be advocating. We sincerely thank you for volunteering to champion these critical priorities, and more importantly, for taking on this mammoth task in the global arena on behalf of our region. With COP26 being our final opportunity to keep 1.5 degrees alive, your dedication and willingness to raise the collective Pacific voice through advocacy, influencing and demanding hard decisions is of vital importance to our Blue Pacific region. As Pacific political champions, we all recognize you have the moral authority to speak on these issues, given the impacts of climate change are already being felt in our region and by our people. As highlighted by the PIF Secretary General Puna, there is so much at stake for our region and so much to be done, including realizing the Paris Agreement, demanding a reduction in emissions, seeking recognition and finances for loss and damage, concluding the negotiations on the markets mechanism, and insisting on the inclusion of oceans on the UNFCCC agenda. Your perseverance to stay the course brings great hope to our Pacific people. The global pandemic is causing even more marginalization and only reaffirms the need for this pandemic and the climate crisis to be tackled hand in hand. Both their impacts are far-reaching. Speaking from the FFA perspective, the impacts of climate change on the distribution and abundance of tuna will be significant. The potential impacts on PCED's economies in 2050 include an average estimated annual loss in regional tuna fishing access fees of around $90 million, with significant reductions in government revenue of up to 20% for some of our Pacific Island nations. COP26 needs to mobilize the necessary mechanisms and processes to effectively address these future losses. We continue to see an increasing impact on food security and livelihoods, where the demand for local consumption of tuna is increasing due to climate change impacts on coastal fisheries. As crop agencies, we are very cognizant of the numerous commitments, the long, difficult hours of negotiations, multiple demands on your time, and that of your accompanying officials. And as CROP, we stand ready to serve and fully support you and your teams. While it is not possible for us all to be in Glasgow, rest assured that we will continue to work together to contribute to these negotiations and events in whatever way we can. Honorable Prime Minister and Ministers, our Pacific political champions, on behalf of my fellow CROP executives and staff, our deepest gratitude to you all, and we wish you every success as you take on the large emitting countries in ensuring climate justice for our Pacific Island home. Recalling Dr. Carlo Miller's words, what we have in common is all of us. So never forgetting why we do what we do and why we must give it our best, our people, our children, our future. May God continue to richly bless you in this important work ahead for our region. Malo Abito.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manu, for those very enriching words and words of encouragement for our high-level political champions. If you were all here, we would invite you outside for a cold coconut and a cup of tea, but we will have to do that at another time when borders are open and we can host our high-level political champions here at your Pacific Climate Change Center in Samoa. So with that, Director General, any final, on behalf of the Director General of SPREP and the One Crop family, I acknowledge the One Crop family, in particular, the Forum Secretariat for their leadership in this initiative, and say a big whakauelahi and whawhatai tele lava to you all till next we meet. Thank you.